Hamstring Injury and Training Workshop, Hamstring Exercises 2, Part 2. So Phase 4 is associated with our specific preparation, Part 1, and we're looking at power development, or the rate of force development. So we're looking at, in particular, trying to improve the ability to decelerate at speed and also to improve the ability to generate more force. So to begin with, we're looking at the kind of decelerating emphasis where we go through these exercises, floor bridge, single leg swaps and bench bridge, single leg swaps, our supine suspension system, alternating fast leg curls, and the same using a stability ball. So first one we'll look at then is a floor bridge, single leg swaps. So very simple exercise, all body weight. It's going to train the hamstrings in multiple different ways at the same time. So we're going to be training the hamstrings isometrically on the stance leg, reactively when the leg lands as we're swapping the legs. It's also going to be trained on the elastic component as the leg is lengthening. And you should be able to extend the leg without stuttering. So you should be able to extend the leg out and then stop it without you seeing this kind of stuttering at the end. Variations, and we'll show this in a second, is the same kind of exercise but done in the bench bridge position. So here we see these floor bridge single leg swaps. We bridge ourselves up, extend one leg out, and then the idea is to very quickly swap the legs out and take the leg that's extended out in front into a kind of fully extended position. So what we're doing here is as that leg extends out, hamstrings lengthening, we're getting used to kind of decelerating this lower limb being thrown out into full knee extension. Here we see the same thing then being performed in the bridge position. So we very quickly swap the leg over. As we said, keeping the hips level. Hamstrings are going to be working on that stance leg somewhat isometrically. We're also going to be kicking in the hamstrings reactively as we land, and then with the leg that's extended out in front, obviously we have the elastic component being trained there as well. We can do something similar with using the suspension system. So these are alternating fast leg curls. Again, it's an isolation exercise. The trick again is to focus on the speed. So we're going to be working the hamstrings eccentrically, reactively and elastically. Heavy on the knee torque, again more of a distal hamstring bias. And again, we can do this as alternating legs, or you can do it both legs at the same time. And if you want a variation of this, then we can do the similar type of thing with a stability ball, or if you do have one, a slide board. So we've done the explanation. Here is it. Here the exercise is in action. So what we're trying to do is effectively, is kick that leg out into extension. It's the hamstrings then that are going to decelerate it. So we're teaching the hamstrings to lengthen and control that lengthening at the knee joint. So as the leg goes into an extended position, it's the hamstrings working to decelerate it. Again, with a lot of plyometric-esque training, you're going to find you don't necessarily feel it a huge amount as you're doing it, it's more afterwards. So we're really looking at training the neurological system with these types of exercises. Here we see a similar type of thing done with a stability ball. This needs to be done both legs at the same time. It doesn't work alternating legs on a stability ball. And again, you're trying to push the ball away as quickly as possible, and it's the hamstrings then controlling the ball as the knees move into full extension. So you try to get best speed, still controlling the movement. So you don't want to compromise the technique, you don't want to get a full extension at the knee joint, but we're just trying to push the ball away, and it's the hamstrings then that are decelerating it before we go into a compromised position. Now we're looking at more on the accelerating emphasis. So we'll look at prone, fast, reactive heel kicks onto a stability ball, sled push, the power band, Romanian deadlift oscillations, and the same thing with a weight plate as well, and then battle rope waves in a bent over or Romanian deadlift position. Now we have fast reactive heel kicks, and we do this on a stability ball. This works well. We'll show you without a partner, but if you do have a partner, it is a lot easier to kind of get into the position. So this is reactive training for the hamstring. So the way this works is as the heel hits the stability ball, bounces off, knee is obviously going to extend, the hamstrings are going to lengthen very quickly. So it's getting used to moving them from that lengthening and then back into a concentric contraction as quickly as possible. So it's kind of like almost plyometric training, if you like, for the hamstrings done in a prone position. So you can vary the length of the hamstrings by moving the position of the stability ball up or down, and that will change the angle of the knee then. But you want to look to try to maintain quite a fast speed of movement with this. So if we watch the video on this one, in this case without a partner, we try to kind of wedge it into position, so as we kick it, it doesn't fly across the room. And then what you're doing is these knee flexion kicks, so the heel is going to tap on the stability ball as it bounces off the stability ball, then goes into a lengthened position, eccentrically lengthening, and then we're trying to bring the heel back to tap the ball again. So it's very much about working the kind of stretch shortening cycle and getting the hamstring used to moving from an eccentric lengthening into a concentric shortening contraction as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. Then we have a sled push. So this is a functional application for acceleration. We're looking at moderate velocity, and it's loaded hip extension. So we're looking at a concentric hamstring function. There's also going to be a reactive hamstring function as the foot strikes the ground. So again, you need a little bit of space for this one. You obviously need a sled as well in your facility, but more and more training facilities are looking at having these types of functional kit in there now. So we're going for a low body position, and the idea is trying to move the sled as quick as possible. So we're not at the same velocity that you would do if you were running, because we're obviously trying to push a heavy load. But it's trying to really get the leg turnover as quick as possible. And then again, looking at trying to produce force quickly. So we can use power bands, you can do this with cables as well. So we're looking at getting into a Romanian deadlift position and then oscillating in this position. So again, focusing on the kind of elastic reactive hamstring function. It's more of a kind of, it is a limited range of motion, and we're kind of looking at the kind of end range of motion for this. And we're trying to maintain a quality of movement and quality of speed. So again, once you start to slow down, you've probably been doing the set for too long. Resistance or load should be appropriate in order to allow you to do it at a fast velocity. If you're doing it too slowly, then you probably need to lighten the load in order to get the speed up. So, going to get into this kind of Romanian deadlift position. So there's a little bit of tension, and the idea is, we're just doing that kind of first phase. So we're going into a lengthened position and then quickly trying to concentrically contract to lift the torso up. So we're loading and then unloading really kind of fast. You're not trying to go through a full range. You're just trying to maintain this kind of tension, just focusing on the kind of elastic component at the end range. Now we can do the same thing with a kind of weight plate. Again, we don't want to go too heavy for this one, so it'd be a lot lighter than you would do for a standard Romanian deadlift, but just at the bottom. Focusing on getting into that Romanian deadlift position, stimulating the muscle spindles, and we're just eccentrically loading and then just doing a fast, small concentric contraction, dipping back down again and just oscillating in that end range position. Again, focus on the speed. You don't want to be slowing down at all. So even if you kind of keep the sets on the shorter side, in order to maintain the speed and the quality of movement. And then the last exercise for this bit, battle rope waves. Now you wouldn't think that this would be great for working your hamstrings, but the kind of the rhythmical nature of up and down waves, again, will produce a similar type of effect to what we've done with some of the other exercises. So you're doing waves in a bent over position, and again, it's looking at training the kind of elastic reactive function of the hamstrings. It's a limited end range of motion. And so the hamstring overload is achieved by maintaining this Romanian deadlift position against the kind of forces of the battle rope. It can be done in a split stance position as well, but it has to be up and down. If you're doing side to side, you're going to get very minimal kind of hamstring overload occurring here. So you kind of get your battle rope waves, a little bit of slack at the bottom, get into your deadlift position, and then it's up and down. So again, if you focus predominantly on the torso, you'll see it's kind of just doing that very similar kind of oscillating movement to what we were doing with the power bands. It's just that small up and down. Obviously the hands are kind of the extension of that, but the movement here is occurring at the kind of hips. It's that small up and down oscillating movement. So again, maintaining the quality of movement, you won't necessarily get feel a huge overload on your hamstrings whilst you're doing it. But yeah, man, the next day your hamstrings will tell you they got worked. Now, phase 5 is the second part of our specific preparation, where we're looking at coordination into functional movements. And again, this kind of links in with phase 4, and even we'll kind of move on further as we start to get into more high velocity running drills. So in particular, we're looking at how do we coordinate this kind of hamstring movement as we start to get into very fast velocities. So this links in with the kind of the ability to control the kind of ground reaction forces upon landing, and also being able to control the limb movement at speed. So we're going to look at our prone wobbles and flicks, and then eccentric step back landing and lateral step off landing and transverse step off landing. We're looking at step off in a lunge drop, split squat drop using a barbell, and then into some more kind of specific running style drills where we're looking at paused sprints or high knees with holds, skipping against a wall or skipping unassisted, and then our sprints against the wall. So our prone wobbles and flicks. This is, again, it's an isolation exercise. So what we're looking at here, kind of these fast wobbles. You do a very quick flexion extension of the knee in the kind of mid-range. You extend one leg quickly, and then you try and stick and hold the kind of lower leg position before it gets to full extension. So you're going to get this elastic hamstring function on the lengthening, and you should be able to again extend the leg without stuttering. So prone on a bench, you're going to flex the knees, do these fast wobbles, and then you're going to flick one leg out and try and stick it without getting any stuttering. Again, we can do it all on the same leg or alternate legs with each repetition. So here we see a stutter where it kind of, that's a close up there, we flick it, it holds, and then you see it lengthen again. And that's what we want to try to avoid. We just want it to flick and hold. So moving on to kind of jump landings. So it's eccentric jump landings. What we're looking at is just trying to effectively control the landing. So it's a compound exercise. In this case, this is a squat movement pattern. It's an isometric hamstring function. So again, we've got our concurrent hip flexion and knee flexion occurring, but it's going to be a lot of reactive forces upon landing. Variations, we can do it with hip emphasis, which we'll show you as well, lateral or transverse emphasis. So the jump landing, so what we do, just a small step, stand on the edge facing away, and then all you're going to do is just step back and effectively drop into a squat position and just stick and hold it. So again, the hamstrings are getting used to decelerating a functional movement, in this case the kind of the landing of a jump. You don't need to do this with a huge amount of load, just body weight will be absolutely fine. Now the hip emphasis variation, we do exactly the same thing, but we're going to focus on a little bit more of a kind of forward lean. So a little less knee bend, a little less quad, and a little bit more torso dropping forward. And so the hamstrings are going to be, you're going to feel a little bit more with this one. So focus on pushing the hips back, limiting the knee bend, and just dropping the chest downwards as you stick the landing. Now the lateral landing, same kind of thing. You just do a little mini step out to the side. So you've got a little bit more kind of frontal plane forces at work here. So we are trying to get the hamstrings used to not just keeping it all sagittal plane. So they need to get used to be able to control a landing with a little bit more frontal plane emphasis as well. And this exercise is very good for that. And then covering all three planes of motion, we can then do our transverse landing. So you stand side on and you do a 90-degree rotation during the jump and land kind of at 90 degrees to where you started off. And again, we'd want to do this so you rotate both ways. You wouldn't want to do it only rotating in one direction. So again, it's more transverse plane, control required, and the hamstring is going to be working then to control the landing at the knee joint with this additional transverse plane forces. Then we have a kind of forward step off lunge drop. So again, a compound exercise, struggling to say it, squat movement pattern. Again, it's an isometric hamstring function. And again, we've got these reactive forces on landing. So what we're going to do here is you're going to stand on a small step and effectively lunge off and then control the landing as you finish in this kind of split squat or lunge position with the rear foot still on the step. So here we see it being performed. In this case, we kind of start off with a little bit of a kind of lifting the leg and knee up to about level with the hip and then dropping down. The longer the stride, the more you're going to get it in the hamstrings as well. Shorter the stride, more quad is going to assist with that deceleration. And then if we do it with the push back as well, again, that's just going to get us used to using that hamstring and loading it during the eccentric phase and then helping to produce more force on the concentric phase. Now the barbell split squat drop. We're actually doing this with a little bit of weight then with a bar. You can add more plates onto the bar as well. Compound exercise, again, another squat movement pattern. Still isometric hamstring function. And again, it's the reactive forces that we're getting on the landing. So with this one, you start on your toes, feet already apart, and then you're just going to drop down into a split squat position, focusing on controlling the landing. Now, one of the coaching cues with this one is you want to focus on pulling the bar down onto and keeping it onto your back. If it's quite relaxed through the upper body, you're going to find the kind of bar moves a little bit and then may bang back on the landing. So bars on the back, we're pulling it downwards onto the back, keeping it tight using the upper body. So we start off up on the toes, and then we're just going to do a little shift of the feet, and then we're controlling that split squat landing position. Again, I tend to do it all on the same leg for this one. So we start off on the toes, split the feet, one back, one forward, and just getting used to decelerating that landing. So again, we're having to control the additional ground reaction forces upon the landing. Plus in a split squat position, we're going to get a little bit more frontal plane forces we're going to have to control as well, more so than if it was a parallel stance. And then back into the higher velocity stuff. So we have paused sprints. It's really good exercise in particular for working on the kind of capacity. So in effect, this is kind of like a high knee exercise, but you're holding and sticking each landing. So again, it's functional, a lot of reactive forces on landing, good for the coordination and capacity of coordination. So work on the coordination is important, but also being able to maintain that for a long period of time. So this is capacity / endurance work. So you're going to do a skip with pauses on each landing. So effectively you're going to stick this kind of single leg stance with the other knee raised. Variation, we can do the same thing where we hold the and pause every kind of third, fifth or seventh landing. We do it on an odd number, so that way you're alternating legs. So these paused sprints in motion. We get our kind of athletic arm movement as well, as if we're kind of running. So effectively it's almost like a running motion with a second or so pause in that kind of top position. Looks a hell of a lot easier than it actually is, so we can do this for 20, 30, 40, 60 seconds. And again, if you have a bit of distance, bit of space in your facility, then this does work very well. If you're a little limited with space, then you may want to look at something like skipping against the wall. Again, very similar, it's functional movement pattern, so it's a sprinting movement. Reactive forces, again, working the hamstrings on landing. And again, coordination capacity training. So we get the body into an angled position, so that's what we'd be looking at for kind of acceleration position for sprinting. And if you want a kind of variation, then doing the similar type of thing in an upright position against or not against the wall is a nice variation to that. So skipping against the wall / wall skipping, whichever way you want to say it. So we get into our angled position. And effectively, skipping is a two-footed landing, knee raise. So 2 feet, lift one knee, back to 2 feet, lift the other leg, and alternate and repeat. So again, we're trying to keep the chest up, the core engaged. Not the type of exercise you're going to feel hugely in your hamstrings until the next day. And then if we're doing it without the wall, same type of thing, 2 foot landing, and then you're lifting the other leg and repeat it. You can do this in place or with a little bit of horizontal movement, as we kind of see here. Some people, this takes a little bit of coordination, find it a bit difficult to get their head around it, but this is what we're kind of looking at. It's effectively it's kind of running drills, focusing on a high knee movement, but very good for bringing someone back into kind of retraining their hamstring for what it needs to do during the sprint movement. We can also do sprints against a wall. So again, very similar type of thing. It's functional, reactive, coordination, capacity training. And what we're looking at with this one is you're going to do a pause on each landing to start with, and then progress to pausing every third, fifth or seventh landing, keeping your body in this angled acceleration position. So initially, looks very similar to what we were kind of doing without the wall. And you're just going to alternate the legs, stick and pause. And then we can build up to changing it every third. So we do 1, 2, 3 and change. Like I said, doing it every on a kind of an uneven number will help us to kind of alternate legs each time, so you don't all do it on the same side. And we can do it to 5s or 7s. So you're just kind of increasing the duration before you do the stick. What you look at then is progressing these into higher velocity and higher ground reaction force drills, sprint starts and acceleration drills, running and sprinting drills, deceleration drills, and then higher velocity plyometric agility type drills that maybe going at kind of depth jumps or jumping over hurdles. Bounding, so an exaggerated running action with a single leg takeoff and alternate leg landing, done repeatedly, and also hopping, so single leg takeoff and then same leg landing. All of these, again, you only want to progress into once we've kind of done the earlier phases. So here we see an example, kind of different running drills. We have our high knees, and then kind of straight leg running. So this is good for kind of focusing on the hip extension with the legs straight, or the high knees, focus on sprinting action. Again, requires a little bit of space. You don't tend to see these done quite so much indoors. So these are good outdoor drills. Really kind of applying all the kind of strengthening work that we've done previously into these kind of high velocity functional gait type movements. So you should now complete the review questions for this module to ensure you've met the learning outcomes, and then complete the guided learning practice for this module, details of which are on the learner management system. You want to practice the exercise yourself, so you're happy with the techniques, and then you practice coaching the exercises to a colleague. Once you've completed the review questions and the guided practice, then you can move on to the next module.